Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. So welcome to the latest episode of Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. And today we're joined by Anna Middleton. And Anna is a hygienist who qualified at the Eastman Dental Hospital after nursing back in 2015. She's the creator of the London Hygienist brand, a key opinion leader for Philips Oroscoptic and guided biofilm therapy, GBT, and an entrepreneur. I'll ask you more about this GBT thing a bit later. Welcome, Anna. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on. How are you?
Very good indeed. Very
good to see you, Anna. Thank you for joining us.
So just to kick off, to get into it, who is Anna Middleton? Who are you? What's your background? How did you get into dentistry? How did the whole thing start?
So I am half Russian, half English, and I grew up in Canada before moving to the UK. And then I left school. Yeah. So my mum's Russian, my dad's English. And then left school at 17 with pocket full of GCSEs and 1 AS level, and sort of said, stuff you to academia. And that was sort of my school life. I actually did sound engineering and music tech before traveling into the world of dental. And basically what happened is, because I left school and didn't really have many grades, so I didn't really want to be at school anymore. My mum was like, please.
Why were you disenfranchised?
I think you get to that. I think you just get to that point where you've had enough, and I changed school a lot growing up. So obviously we moved a lot, and I changed school pretty much every year. And then come the sort of final hurdle of it, to the pressure to sort of leave school with the sort of grades that the school want you to leave with to, meet their like sort of league tables and things, became something that wasn't going to happen for me. So I just was like, let's cut our losses while we're ahead. And I probably dropped out 2 terms before the end of my final year. And then I just worked in hospitality. So I'd always worked in hospitality since I was 13. Worked in a restaurant while I was 17, and then just kind of was waiting to turn 18 to work into bars. And then my mum was like, please, can you do something at college? Like anything. So I ended up going and doing this music course. And I did music throughout my whole life at school, which I love. But I was never going to be an award-winning music producer. Let's put it that way.
Can I ask a question about?
I'm not that talented.
Just take you back on the. Did you say you changed school virtually every year?
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much.
Why was that? And that must be really hard.
Just moved quite a lot with like my family and things, and I also was one of those who maybe had a bit of I wouldn't say a big mouth, but I did struggle to fit in some schools. So there was a combination of maybe leaving schools and being asked to leave some schools.
Oh, right. Okay.
Like something in between. I'm not like a bad kid or anything. It's just, when they do that thing.
This isn't therapy. It's fine. Yeah. It's fine.
No, it's not like I'm being expelled. It's like sort of like for your own welfare and well-being, we think that you'd be better suited somewhere else. And I was like, no problem at all.
But as a young person, I guess, as you grow up, you realise that builds resilience, and that the hospitality work you're doing in terms of communication skills and reading people. Back then, you'd probably just like, I just want a job, I just want to earn a few quid, and you probably had no idea that the skills you were acquiring then would serve you so well in later life.
There's definitely something to be said for it, looking back in hindsight. And I think there was maybe that just sort of element of never really finding like my sort of place within academia, and then even like to a certain degree with work. And then maybe everything that I've done now is maybe a sort of a result of those environments that I've spent time in. It gets to a point where you have a certain threshold. And obviously by the time I left school, I was like, this is just obviously not for me. I mean, that's 18 and, I have been back to school since then.
Quite a lot.
But quite a few times actually. But the music thing didn't work out for me. Hospitality I think it's something great to do while you're younger. But again, I was in this position where I was never progressing past like supervisor or assistant manager. And then it was all sort of around the time when the credit crunch hit. So I was one of those. I was a bit of I always had my fingers in pie. So I worked for my parents for a bit. I worked in a bar. I did telesales. I did promo work on the weekend. I always had like multiple jobs on the go. And then when the credit crunch hit, I basically lost 3 jobs like overnight, sort of my most secure ones. And one of them actually was for an arts company where I did do some actual music work. And it was sort of that point where you're like, oh God, what am I going to do with my life? And I, at this point, decided that actually I really would like to study again. The only problem was my parents had moved back to Russia at this point. So I've got a car, a dog, a job, a house. You know, I'm an adult, you know, I'm in my mid-20s. Everyone else has either swanned off to uni or done their gap years. And I'm a grown-up, you know. I'm teeing myself up for my retirement, having been working since 13. So then I was like, what am I going to do? And a friend said to me, why don't you become a dental nurse? So I was like, actually, this is a really good idea, because I needed something that I could get paid to do while studying. So I essentially became an apprentice. And
was your friend,
I don't know if anyone...
The friend that said this, was your friend in dentistry? Is that why they suggested?
Yeah, she was a dental... Yeah, she's a dental nurse.
It's a bit of a random choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Down the pub.
So she was a dental nurse.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So she is a dental nurse. And she was like, why don't you consider that? And I was like, actually, because I always did have this sort of desire to do, it was either medicine or music, but again, you know, leaving school without the grades, you then just draw a line under anything medical and park that. And I also thought there was something about dentistry which would be less emotive than perhaps some other jobs. Like, I'm not very good if someone's upset or in pain. You know, I am an empath, so working in a job that, you know, I'd have to deal with like dead and dying, I was like, actually, that's not for me either. Yeah. But there was something about dentistry that's a bit more like, you get all the medical, you get all the science, but you kind of probably don't go home and worry about patients or work, you know, through the night and things like that. And also it's like, okay, this is an easy win. I'm an apprentice. I'm getting paid while learning, which is always a bonus. And the only thing is, in Exeter, it's obviously quite a small place. I don't know if anyone knows it really, but finding a job was going to be the second challenge as well. So I applied for 2, didn't get those 2 jobs. And then I was like, I'm so determined to become a dental nurse that I actually walked to every single dental practice in Exeter till someone gave me a job. And I had my CV. I'd actually organized my own training placement to the point where all I needed was 16 hours of work experience a week. And I was willing to like do it for free. And I walked around, I'd read the whole dental nursing textbook. So at my interview, I was like, I know how to chart, I know all about cross-infection. And eventually I did get given one of the job that was really, they were like, can you drive?
Where does this tenacity come from? Because I know a lot of people who...
At this point, I'd lost everything. I had nothing. I had no jobs. And I was like, I'm done. When I've got an idea in my head, I'm like a dog with a bone. And if someone says it can't be done, that just pours fuel on the fire. Right. So I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go for it. And again, the opportunities aren't there like they were, for example, like in London. You know, it's a small city. There's limited practices. It's also one of those places where people get a job and they stay in that job forever. You know, it's
how many of those visits did you have to do?
I think I made I printed them out and I made like a route. So one day I did all the ones in like sort of one area. And then the job I ended up getting, I interviewed at a sister practice for it. So it was on the other side of town and they were like, do you drive? I said, yeah. They went, do you have a car? And I said, no. And this job was for like a float nurse position. So to cover the whole of Devon. I said, if you give me the job, I will go and buy a car tomorrow. And yeah, they gave me the job. I ended up with the best role out of the ones I'd been to. It was a full-time position, all my training. Obviously the pay was shocking to the point where I obviously carried on working in a bar and working on the weekends and things like that. But obviously that's then where my sort of journey into hygiene began, because I spent my first 3 months working with the hygienist. Right. I didn't actually know what a hygienist was until I started as a dental nurse. And she then became my inspiration for everything I did there on out. Because I thought, this is great. This is what I want to do. I want to see my own patients. I want to work 4 days a week, do 10 till 4, go on like 3 exotic holidays a year. Bearing in mind, none of that is working out for me now. It's quite the opposite. But that was like, I was like, right, this is what I'm going to do. So then that following sort of year, becoming a dental nurse, and everything I did from that moment forward was to then prepare to get into uni.
So,
because then my next hurdle was not having the grades to get into
tenacity,
uni.
brilliant.
But I was going to say, but it's tenacity. But you've also got that entrepreneurial flair as well, in that you're prepared to do things that other people don't do. Yeah, a case in point, you set about and you created, London Hygienist as a brand. That is a very entrepreneurial thing to do. Back then and even now, hygienists typically are people who work within practices, who treat the patients who are presented before them that are generated by the practice, and that's their schedule, that's their work. They turn up and they just deliver. Who
don't really have an identity.
No.
Can't you just see the hygienist?
Yeah.
It's not any name, it's the hygienist. You might see Mr. Patel, the dentist, but you wouldn't see, Anna, the hygienist. You'd probably say, oh, yeah, you'll see the hygienist. Yeah. It's real interesting.
So that was a real turning point. And are your parents entrepreneurial? Is that something that just was an extension of your tenacity, that I just want to be different and do things differently?
I think, because I've been asked this question before, so I don't come from a business background, a medical background. Having worked from the age of 13 in so many different roles, I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I've seen what works in businesses. I've watched businesses around me through friends or family do very well. And on the flip side, I've seen what failure looks like. And I think sometimes actually where the real sort of, attention to detail with me comes from is seeing failure and some of the difficulties that myself or my family have been through and learning how to not repeat those sort of mistakes with my own sort of business and life choices. And I think that is where a lot of strength lies, because quite often people have said, well, why haven't you done this yet? Why haven't you done that yet? I'm like, everything I do is calculated, and you'll if you've known me for up till this point, you'll get it. And as you watch my career continue for the next, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you'll realize that it's because I'm calculated with my movements, because I know the reality of it, because by just taking a step back, I ask the right questions, I speak to the right people. And that is something I think I'm just very protective of, wanting to make sure that perhaps my life and my business doesn't turn out like other people's.
I think that learning from failure, isn't it? Everyone sort of goes, oh, you learn from, success. And I think we say, why fail yourself when you can learn from the experience of people that failed before you? Don't repeat the same mistakes, and you can learn well from them as much as you can learn from successful people.
I don't even want to call it failure. There's no such thing as failure. It's feedback at the end of the day. Because at the time, if you knew you were going to fail, you wouldn't be classifying that as failure. You would be classing it as an attempt, or, going forward with something. But then, all the sayings, fail to prepare and prepare to fail and things like that. There is all those elements to it. And I guess maybe it's like some weird sixth sense that I sometimes have with what I do and why I do the things. But equally, there's lots of things that I have done that didn't pay off or didn't work out long term. And I just, obviously continue to learn from those.
And why did you want to create the London Hygienist? I think it's a really cool position to take. I think it's really neat. It puts you in my opinion, the best city in the world. It's explicit about who you are and what you do. But why did you want to have that, as opposed to what the rest of the profession, who are hygienists, that typically work within a practice and are happy just to receive? Why was it important for you to have that identity?
So what happened is, when I went to uni, it was the same year that direct access came into play. So in 2013, the GDC removed the barrier. And that meant I said, well, this is obviously going to be a thing. If the public can come and see a hygienist or a therapist in their scope of practice without a prescription, there's a huge market for that. And obviously those before me have already capitalized on that in various ways, men and women who I look up to for what they've achieved. But my thing at that particular time was I'm not going to open a clinic immediately. I'm also, I'm a student, I'm studying. However, it did start to make me think, well, how would someone find me if they wanted my services in the future. So no one's going to Google Anna Middleton and be like, I'm going to go, they're not going to instinctively be like, I need to find Anna Middleton. And if you at that time Googled Anna Middleton, it would come up with Kate and Pippa anyway. So then I was thinking to myself, well, how would someone find me? And so I sat down and I Googled London Hygienist and nothing came up. I was like, well, this is ridiculous. So I just bought the .com, bought the .co.uk and swiped up all the social media handles like immediately. And I thought, right, I'm just going to purchase these and sit on this because there's something in this. And if you think of like some of the like bigger brandings and things, like you say, most hygienists work in the clinic and they're just under that, the name of the practice or the name of the dentist. No one had really branded themselves. And I just thought, well, you've got like Chicago Pizza, LA Gym. Now it's time for London Hygienist. Yeah. And then I honestly, I did nothing with it because I still had this dream of just graduating and working 4 days a week. I was like, I'll go work on Harley Street. And I did all of that. And then essentially what happened is through a series of like, just bad jobs and I guess finding my feet, I'd applied for a few other jobs and didn't get the role. And again, it was that sort of frustration thing of like, why am I trying to be the star of someone else's show? Let me just pull my finger out. I clearly came up with London Hygienist for a reason. And it's almost like the universe was saying, I'm not going to give you anything else because this is actually where you need to be putting your time and energy. And then from that moment, it was like, I created my first website, which was just a WordPress page. My business cards came from Vistaprint. Everything was off like my own back. And then it was just pumping out calls to action because the other part of my business model is the fact that my USP is the reality that I understand that the fear of pain and lack of control are massive barriers in dentistry. So having worked obviously in hospitality, I'm a big believer in practicing with EQ over IQ. So a patient can tell me everything I need to know about them in the first 30 seconds that they walk into the room as to what kind of service they want. So that was my USP anyway. And then the whole premise of London Hygienist is to change the way that oral healthcare is delivered to patients and improve access to oral healthcare. So the business started growing off the back that patients were coming and they were having a really positive experience. They really liked how I positioned myself in terms of education, and that I was sort of breaking the mold of the generic sort of oral healthcare messages that were being pumped out and giving it a new modern day spin and showing that not all dental professionals are horrible butchers that are going to, hurt you in the dental chair. And that was like the sort of.
That's probably got a good strap line, isn't it? Yeah. I'm not a horrible bitch who's not going to hurt you. Is that on your marketing?
But I say to people all the time, I'm like, there's the good cop and the bad cop, and I like to play the good cop. Yeah. Like, I don't moan and nag at anyone. And again, it all comes down to effective sort of communication and how you hold yourself. And the thing is, at the end, it's a business. Like, yes, I'm providing a service, but the reason it's doing so well now is like the people are buying they're buying me. They're buying into me. And then it goes back to the whole golden circle thing of like, I put my why first and then my what and my how second.
Yeah. So I've got two questions. They're kind of related. So the first one is, how long did the domains, the social handles and the branding sit on the shelf for before you did something with it? And then the second one is, how was it received by the profession when you kind of put yourself out there and made it public in terms of what you're doing? Because are you familiar with Malcolm Gladwell? Have you heard of the writer, Malcolm Gladwell?
Yeah.
So Malcolm, he's the staff writer for The New Yorker, and he wrote a book called Outliers, which basically is people who perform to an exceptional level that kind of fall outside of the norm. And he does lots of work around sociology and physiology and stuff. And he kind of says he did a study on sports people, and he found the people that perform at the very highest level of sport are outliers. So the David Beckhams, the Messis, the Federers, they don't conform to the norms of what you'd expect. And I see you as being an outlier. You've got all these people that behave in a particular way, and you're over here. Yet the things you're doing, the success you're having, you could argue is not on the same level as people who typically do what you do. So it's how do you mould on it, but also how was it received by the profession?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
This is why I keep getting kicked out of school. Okay, so
a female and an upstart hygienist.
the rebel.
Yeah.
My dad always says, my dad was always like, your mouth is what gets you in trouble. So I have learned over the years to listen, twice, speak once.
Moderate.
To answer your question, the domains, the social media handles, things like that, they kind of were always there. And then maybe I had them towards the tail end of uni. And then I started dabbling a bit in the social media stuff as I graduated. I started writing a blog, and I was kind of trying to direct patients there for extra reading material and information while I was working for other people. And then what essentially started happening was I was joining places where there was no diaries. So everything I did was then a call to action. So then my sort of marketing strategy and everything was then to hone in on that because I needed bums in seat. So I think, whatever, let's say like Christmas, I'd be like, okay, let's do something around teeth whitening in the run up to that, or New Year. Now let's do stain removal after all the like red wine and nice things. So it's like always forward thinking as to like, what am I planning in terms of content? And I also had the opportunity to sort of really raise the profile of what a hygienist actually does and promote direct access. So I could be like, you have a dentist, but you can come and see me for all these wonderful services. So then it just sort of, it's one of those things, I think with things like social media and perhaps like my business growth, it really is that compound interest, sort of application in the sense that these were all small steps repeated daily over a period of time. And I guess now it's just at that point where I'm really starting to ride that real steep, uphill, I guess, rewards of the efforts that I've put in early on. And then how it was received by the profession.
Yeah.
I'm stubborn as well. That's what it comes down to.
Stubborn
the other thing
tenacity.
about the industry, the problem with the industry as well is I think a lot of people just didn't understand what I was doing. They were like, how is this going to work? How is this a viable business model? Like most people thought I was insane. A lot of people laughed. A lot of people told me it couldn't be done. And again, not to do this sort of thing, but as sometimes as a woman as well, and a younger woman looking up to sort of like peers for help and support. No one really like poo-pooed it, but at first they just didn't understand it. And then as it started to gain momentum, all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, wow, you're doing amazing. Oh, you've done really well. And like, oh, you're a genius. I'm like, and
it's flattering. At the time. I was going to say it's flattering and irritating at the same time.
Can I join you?
Because I think anything that hasn't been done before, that most people say it's impossible, which is why it hasn't been done before. And the really smart people say, well, what is the art of the possible? What could be done? And it's those people that generally change things and move it on. And it's very easy to then say, after the event, oh, well, it's obvious. But it wasn't obvious at the time it happened because it didn't even exist as a thing.
But there's been times as well, and obviously never to like, badmouth anyone and things, but there were times when comments arise such as, well, why are they using her? Why have they chosen to work with her? She's just a hygienist.
Yeah.
I mean, when I hear stuff like that, I'm tough skinned. Okay, remember, this is not an issue for me. If anything, it just stoked the fire even more. I'm like, keep coming at me with that attitude and mentality, because this is probably why we still have some of the problems we have in dentistry. So I have this big gripe when people go, oh, but we've always done it this way. And I'm like, that just, I can't work with people or around people that have that sort of mentality. And I'm like, we have problems. I'm a problem solution kind of girl. I loved puzzles growing up. I still love it now. And I think that's why I really enjoy what I'm doing with the brand and the business, in the sense that there are problems and I'm finding solutions, which therefore propositions me really well in front of, for example, not just my patient base, but also the industry, which is why it has led to partnerships or industry involvement, because there are people who can see what I am doing. And there are now other clinicians who are following this business model because it works.
But also from a human health and a patient point of view, hygiene is a very easy access point into dentistry. So if you get it right and you can get patients in on a hygiene program, actually it turns around and it's no longer the dental practice referring to the hygienist. You end up with a good hygiene program and suddenly you start referring people into dentistry. So it's the same thing, just viewed in a slightly different way. And patients will engage with the people they feel most comfortable engaging with.
It's more approachable, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
Well, this is the other thing as well. So bearing in mind, I am a lot of people's first contact in the sense like at the moment, particularly post sort of lockdown and COVID, I've got patients that haven't come in years and then they've perhaps seen my social media or they've read about me in an article. And they finally, after years of avoiding the dental chair, had plucked up the courage to come. At that point, then, I am that first touch point. I have the opportunity to show them that you can have a pleasant experience. Also, because there's certain elements of dentistry which I can't do, I'm able to then talk them through those procedures. And because I'm not going to be carrying them out, they almost feel like, well, I trust you because you don't have a hidden agenda to be carrying them out.
From the patient's point of view, the what you can and what you can't do doesn't really bother them. In that moment, you are the face of dentistry.
Yeah, you are. That's right.
You are the face of dentistry. That interaction is going to determine whether they decide to come back, whether they're going to tell their friends, whether they're going to have a positive experience. So the actual clinical, what you can do and what you can't do, kind of is by the by. It's an experience, isn't it? If that goes well, it blows up for everybody.
Because this is the other aspect to it as well. People say, well, there's no money in a healthy mouth. And I'm like, well, these are someone, for example, someone who hasn't come for 7 years, who is now coming every 3 months and is happy coming every 3 months because they now see the value in the investment. So, I'm pretty fully booked these days, and that's only sort of growing and expanding because once you get them through the door and you convert them, that's it, which means what I set out with my business model at the very beginning is and the sort of my company ethos and messaging has paid off to the point where I don't know if you knew or not, but I obviously went back to uni last year and did my second degree.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm now a dental therapist, which therefore means I've now expanded my scope of practice even further to therefore mean that when the patient comes in, if they do need some of that basic dentistry, I can now complete that for them. And I think, again, post-COVID and with waiting times and as a business model in terms of how we all work together, actually utilizing hygienists and therapists to their full scope of practice has got to be the way forward. And I encourage more and more people to actually work better with their hygienists and therapists if they're not already.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
From a scalability point of view, London Hygienist is Anna Middleton and Anna Middleton is London Hygienist. Is it a scalable model? Would you ever feel comfortable bringing other people in using your effectively, those two terms are interchangeable? Will you let somebody else use that name?
100%. The thing is, one day I would like it to be London Hygienist meet the team, or multiple sort of sites and things. And the thing is, all what I do in terms of actual clinical skills is not different to the rest of my sort of profession and my peers. What it is just the business model and the approach. And I guess, like I said, the EQ element to it. So if you have a great team of people who function on that same wavelength, they're impressionable, they've got all those people sort of skills and, and they evolve and become part of the brand, then it's no different to, for example, when you say fly on a, Virgin Atlantic flight in comparison to, say taking a Ryanair flight, you're paying for like a certain level of service and you're paying for the time, the expertise and the sort of equipment used. And that's, just in reference to like sort of my thing. But 100%, I want to see more autonomy for hygienists and therapists. I want to continue to improve access for the public and essentially eradicate some of the, oral health diseases that we have that are easily avoidable.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's lots of misconceptions about dentistry, isn't it? It's painful, expensive, and makes you bleed. Yeah. And I think the more we can break down those barriers, the better it's got to be.
And that the kind of the term within the profession is direct access. But if you just think about it as access to dentistry, if you can access it in a way which makes you feel comfortable and is a good experience, you're much more likely to visit more.
The other aspect of it as well with direct access, the private healthcare model is changing in the sense that it is becoming more desirable and actually, an affordable option for many people. And I'm not going to say that's like a blanket thing for the UK. Obviously, if we look at those socioeconomic scales in different areas and different people's needs, but there is something to be said about how the direct access model can be used to help alleviate some of the pressures and strains, perhaps within like the NHS, but also just giving the public the choice as well to have those positive experiences and see that actually, like you were saying, it can be a pleasant experience, that it's an investment into your health long term. There's so many things in there, and it's something I hope that I can maybe weave further into the business as it expands. There's just not enough hours in the day, is there, for all this world domination?
That's right, yeah. Dominating one mouth at a time.
To rest. Yeah.
Do you get loads of contact, I'm assuming, from hygienists who sort of, DM you, contact you and saying, hey, how can I do it? Or just well done. Thanks for elevating us. It must be you must almost be like the, it's not quite the right word, but like the champion or poster girl for hygienists. People go, oh yeah, right. Yeah, I can imagine you must get loads of that because of your visibility.
I mean, there definitely has been lots of nice, positive feedback from people. And I've always said I have an open door policy. So if anyone ever wants to come and shadow, whether they're a student or they're already a hygienist, I want them to be able to have as much sort of fun and happiness as I'm enjoying. When I first entered the sort of hygiene world, it was actually after 6 months, I nearly jacked it all in. Like I was miserable. I don't feel that there was,
oh, really?
I actually I went to Thailand for 3 weeks and considered not coming back. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for. And this is what I mean. I'm like, I'm so, I can be a little bit erratic. Sometimes I'm like, yes, let's do the same. I'm like, I don't want just a tiny bit. But there's method to the madness, and actually going away gave me some headspace. And that is kind of a bit of a turning point when I was like, okay, I want to get this London Hygienist thing off the ground. I don't fit in to other people's practices or models, just like I didn't fit into school or certain jobs. And that's how that then progressed. And again, I just want other hygienists and therapists, any dental professional, nurses, dentists, we're kind of in this together. And I know it's difficult for many people. I've been on that side of it. However, I always will offer my help and support.
You mentioned the shadowing. Do many people want to take you up on that? Is it like a constant thing that people are? Because that must be, in a way, great at one time, but also potentially a little bit exhausting because you've got people that you're mentoring as you go.
Well, like, for example, we've got a work experience girl in this week, and she came and watched me do a couple of things, and then I was like, look, can I pop you in with some of the other dentists so you can see? She's applied for dental school, Bearing in mind, I knocked on every single door before there was social media to ask for a job. Now, if a young person at any stage of their career or life is coming to me as someone that they look up to and saying, can I come and learn from you or watch from you? I see the young me in those people. Yeah. Of course, I'm going to pay it forward. You don't know who these people are going to be one day. I may need a job off them. It's you want to be careful. So, and I just think if you've got that grit in you to be putting yourself out there, of course, I'm gonna welcome you in with open arms, because that's like you say, that's the tenacity that you do need to go far.
And I think if we've got knowledge and information, I agree with you. I think we have a responsibility to share that. Yeah. Because
they say pay it forward.
Well, and it just fast forwards their progress, doesn't it? Which is so
Andy,
important.
it's like it's no different to when I've called you and asked you for help and advice and things like that. You look up to people. And
that's only because I'm tall.
That will shift. I know, I'm sure. That changes throughout life and things. And there's times when actually people have come to me the other way, as in, people who've been in the game for a long time, and they're like, Anna, what do you think about this? Or what's your take on this? And like, you're asking me? And they're like, yeah, we want to know what you think. So that's a really nice feeling, and I think if the world could work more in that way, we'd probably get I think more solutions.
In the last year, the word collaboration's massively overused, but I think it shows that everything's joined up, and the more that we can help everybody either who's in the profession or is connected to the profession in some way. It has to be good for the profession. It's got to be good. You know, if people are helping one another and sharing information and generally trying to uplift people, that's got to be good. And okay, sometimes you might have weeks where you feel you're giving a lot more than receiving, but those weeks kind of come over the course of a year. You know, I think if you just keep doing the right thing, it does come back to you. It pays back massively.
I think we always say, you know, whilst we might not make money of someone at the moment in time, the answer is you'll always make something from someone. It might be 20 years down the line, but you know, your friendship or relationship or advice that they then give to someone else that they think, you know, it goes, what goes around comes around. I think is that.
There's something really interesting in what you just said there, and this is something else I think people need to bear in mind. It's I've been reading the Stephen Bartlett's Happy Sexy Millionaire.
Oh, it's good,
and
isn't it?
He touches really, really good. And he touched on something that was really interesting, where he talks about invisible PR. Now, whether that be good PR or bad PR, in the background, there's always things being said about you, or people are talking, and everything you do will kind of come together. So I think sometimes with a lot, like you say, even though you're not getting paid or whatever, you've got to think about what does this mean sort of long term for either yourself or the people that you're involved in. Because one small thing that I do today, which I think, that was nothing, I would have done that for anybody, could be really life changing or mean the world to somebody else.
Oh, and we've all done it where we've said something to somebody and we've dropped, you know, the wrong word, or we've said it in a particular way. And in that moment, it didn't mean anything to us. And then you hear that it was really upsetting for the person. And it's like, that was never my intention. I never meant to do that. And I'm devastated that I hurt your feelings. But in that moment, it was just something you said, and you didn't even realise that it had the impact. And it's that the power of words is enormous, isn't it? You know,
hugely.
And actions as well.
Yeah.
Actions as well, especially within a team, you know, that's, you know, often those speak louder as well, you know, how people interact and how they think and conduct themselves. I mean, look, we're all human, no one's perfect. We have these moments, but it's just, I think if we all just are a little bit sort of like more conscious about the actions that we do carry out and things.
Yeah. I was want to put into a lay-by for a second and ask you about guided biofilm therapy, GBT. For no other reason, I love the hats. I think the hats are the coolest thing on the planet. But this isn't a clinical podcast, so we don't want to get clinical on it. But in terms of your business, what's GBT done for you? How's that changed things in terms of how you go about business?
It's an unfortunate set of illusions.
Okay, so if we... if we go back to the point where I said, obviously, I wanted to change the patient experience in the sense I wanted them to have a pleasant experience, this is where GBT really lends itself. It's essentially a spa for the teeth. So we've replaced traditional sort of cleaning methods with fancy high-end Swiss cleaning gadgets. And the idea is that rather than sort of scratching, scraping, and just jumping in and kind of going to town on a patient's mouth, what you're doing is you're disclosing the biofilm with a dye. So we put the purple dye on the teeth, patient can see where the plaque is, I can see where it is. And then we remove it with a combination of warm water, air, and soft powder. So it's super gentle. Then if you need to do any scaling, you only remove things that are like hard, that aren't supposed to be there. So therefore you're sort of less generalized scratching and stabbing around. And again, it uses warm water, it's quiet. It is a pain-free treatment. So for a lot of people, even if they're like, oh, I don't believe you, I'm like, just trust me on this one. And by the end of it, they're like, that was incredible. That felt amazing. My teeth feel great. And then because they had such a nice, pleasant experience, they are more than happy to book back in. They book back in on the day. So that's like how it's revolutionized and changed. Yeah. Exactly. It's a spa for the teeth. And that's what really sort of, I was looking, so my sort of relationship with EMS, the company, and GBT, essentially, again, this is how the business opened out, in the sense that I was already looking for ways to improve the patient journey. So I was kind of already doing a hybrid of GBT without using the full kit. They saw the work that I was doing online and we're like, we want Anna to be an ambassador in the UK. Wow. So then they got flown out to Switzerland, got made an ambassador. And then now that's how I've basically been helping within the UK sort of market in terms of getting other hygienists and therapists trained up. So I'm a Swiss Dental Academy trainer now, one of 10 in the UK and only like 340 globally. So again, just this little girl on social media taking her before and after pictures and trying to break the mold. They took on the hygienist to front up this rather than dentists and things. So again, it's just bringing hygienists and therapists on a par and changing the game.
It's interesting. In my head, I've just got this vision. That's a very weird one. But you know, like when you go and have a gentle massage in a spa with all the oils, and they slowly sort of like maneuver your joints and stuff like that. And then you've got the other one where you go for a Turkish massage with some big bloke beats the crap out of you. It's in a way, I've got the spa treatment as opposed to, as you say, I love the fact of the stabbing around. You know, it's fascinating.
But also, it's one of those great things. It's the technology is being used for the patient benefit, and the experience for them is so much better. So they're much more likely to return.
But this is the other thing as well. So, for example, quite often I'm met with resistance from certain professionals, and particularly some from a maybe older demographic and things. So their training pathway may have been different. Now, in terms of this biofilm directed treatment pathway, we've only really known about biofilm since the 70s. And on top of that, air polishing systems for the management of biofilm is something that's then been progressively becoming more used since then. So our understanding is changing constantly. So I'm a big advocate of tech and innovation, especially within the medical field. And I think as our understanding of certain diseases and things progress, so should our approaches and our treatment methods. So what used to work once upon a time, I'm not arguing with it, but I'm just saying now I've got a way to do something that's better, quicker, and nicer for the hygienist, the patient, and their team, sort of thing.
Open heart surgery and hip replacement. Technology.
Yeah. But also, I think that philosophy applies to business as well. The methods that worked 20, 30 years ago have changed. There's digital platforms available to us.
Definitely.
And I think having that mindset that says, well, clinically, as we learn more, we should adapt our solutions. If you think about business, from where you started to where you are now, you're not doing the things today that you did yesterday. And I mean, you're still young. There's loads of chapters of your book still to be written, and you won't be doing things in 2, 3, 5, 10 years time that you're doing today. Because you will evolve as well. And where is that future? What does that future look like?
What does the future hold? I think obviously I'm at that point now where, having qualified as a therapist, just in the last year, I really want to really hone in on my new skill set. So I've been doing 2 postgrad diplomas, because from the girl who hated academia, I can't get enough of it now. This is it. After this, no more. So I'm going to do these postgrad diplomas. I know, everyone's like, are you going to go for a PhD? I'm like, absolutely not.
5 years' time, we'll be interested to know what else you've done.
It's because someone will turn around and go, you can't do it. So then I'll be raging. I'll be like, right, that's it.
I was going to say, that's all you need. Flip the switch. I don't think you do that enough. No, I don't think it's in you.
That's out of your knowledge. You wouldn't be able to do that.
I've got to be honest. What I do want to say is I really enjoy the position I now have, being able to help and support other people within the industry. So I really enjoy my industry partnerships. I really enjoy education and teaching other hygienists and therapists. I get real sort of buzz from that. I love my patients, but I think, let's be honest, it's time to write that next sort of 5-year plan. And I guess everyone is gunning for the
isn't
it? Everyone's gunning for the clinic. They want to see the clinic open. They want to see London Hygienist actually in physical and not just out of someone else's surgery. And I think through time and planning and maybe getting over some of my own limiting belief factors, it's got to be my legacy, right? I've got to just do it. I've come this far.
And where do you
tell me I can't do it, so then I go and do it.
Yeah, no, it's rubbish. You'll never get there, Anna. It's going to be completely, I wouldn't even bother if I was you. I'd just give up.
That's what I need. But
it's interesting, the things that drive us, isn't it? For you, the thought that somebody might kind of, whisper, I don't think you should ever do that. I don't. That is a massive motivator for you, isn't it? Yeah, that kind of I'll prove you wrong type mentality, and we all need something that drives us.
Yeah, we'll post it today on social media.
Yeah.
Anna can't do that.
That's it. Give me 3 months and the work rate will go through the roof.
But also, I think for hygienists and therapists, I think that just raises the bar again. And whether you ultimately do it or not, kind of, okay, yeah, it'd be a lovely thing. And if you get there, it'll be amazing. But even for where you are, you have raised the bar, you've raised the profile. But also, I think you raised the expectation of people coming behind you of what it can be.
Yeah, definitely.
Which I think is really exciting. And so often you look within an area, a market, a profession, whatever, and you look what the possibilities are. And before you, the possibilities were pretty much you would just be self-employed, but you'd be working within a practice. Yeah. Whereas now, you've got the opportunity to create a brand. There's a pathway where you could own a practice. You could create a chain of practices. The opportunities. So for people who are thinking about it as a profession, who are at school, we were talking to somebody the other day about people need to make decisions on their long-term career when they're doing their GCSEs or A-levels. Yeah. People could now look at hygiene or therapists as a pathway and say, actually, I could have my own business, as in I could physically have a business where people come to me and it builds out from there. That wasn't there 5 years ago.
No, not at all.
No. And actually, for the sort of purpose of this podcast and anyone listening, my business has only profited every single year. Even last year, when I didn't work for 3 months, I have zero overheads in the sense that I run a business and a brand out of clinics and I do nothing but turn over like pure profit. To the point where the business has grown so much that where I now work at Knightsbridge, I only see London Hygienist patients on a Wednesday when I'm there. Obviously, they know, they're fully supported. They're like, I'm the only clinician that's fully booked. And myself and many other hygienists and therapists, we're now grossing more than dentists some days when we're in. And then that's not even factoring in the amount that we then refer on top out to specialists or for extra and things. So this is a viable business model. And actually, you don't need to open the clinic. And I think perhaps this is partly why I've not progressed down that path yet. I mean, I've got it cushy, I'm doing my sort of 3-4 days a week now. I joke and say I'm semi-retired. I run a successful brand and business. And I come home and I sleep well every night. I get to sort of, I work hard, I play hard. But often there's a problem where, for example, a hygienist or a therapist may position themselves within a practice to their principal and say, look, I want to do a bit more on social media, or want to see a bit more direct access. And it freaks them out. There's a certain type of person, I'm not going to say what kind of person that may be, but it freaks them out. They don't like it. And then it diminishes the sort of efforts of this individual coming forward. And what I want people to do is maybe have a look at some of the things I've done and other people who are working in the same way that I am and see how successful a business model it actually is. And, we all want to do well and see our businesses succeed. So therefore, it's like maybe just adapting some of the things can then obviously bring joy, happiness and money to everyone involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we're in a constantly evolving market, and these things are going to happen. Whether you as a dental practice owner want it to happen or not, it's going to happen. And I think the sooner you can understand the change coming and embrace it and incorporate it somehow in your business, the better.
Get with the program.
It is, because you can't control, no one's going to be able to control whether you do the things you do or not. So I think you need to sit down and work out how it works. You can work in a relationship where it works for both of you. It's a bit like where you see kind of, what I refer to as super associates who, live on Instagram, they're generating their own patients into the practice. That makes lots of practice owners nervous. You just need to work out what that model looks like. And with yourself and other people who are following you, it's not dissimilar. You just need to understand how you integrate that into your practice, because it can and should be good for everybody.
And it does work. I'm walking, talking, living proof, It does work.
Yeah.
You just need to make sure you get good tax advice.
Oh, I mean, listen, my accountant is my boy and I'm never letting him go. He always jokes and says, oh, don't forget me when you're rich and famous. I'm like, I'm going to need you even more then. And so we're going to need to make things disappear.
Obviously, legally.
Yeah. I mean, he is funny. He does look at my account sometimes and he's like, so are we going to talk about this expense? I mean, just to give you an example, I did go to Ibiza one year and I may have spent some money in Blue Marlin. And he was like, how has this come out of your business account? I was like, team building exercise.
You
and he
were
was like,
networking.
you're the only member of your team. I was like, yes, and I needed to take my team out for the day. So it's like we constantly laugh. But no, I'm a good girl, and I pay all my taxes.
Pleased to hear it. Pleased to hear it. I've found it fascinating, Anna. I think your story is
thank you.
I think credit to you, but also it's inspiring for the profession, and not just people thinking about becoming a hygienist or a therapist. I think across dentistry, people should be looking at you as a shining light for what could be done in the profession and how the profession can expand. So I found it fascinating.
You're here to stay, and that I think when we were speaking earlier, imitation is the proof that it's working.
Yes.
Because if it wasn't, nobody would imitate you.
Yeah.
This is true. And it's nice to see. And like I said, I have no problem with sharing that pie with everyone. There's plenty to go around. I've got enough going on, with my stuff. So it's fine and it's good. And I do like collaborative work, and I'm excited to see how this sort of industry models over the next sort of few years. Or at least in my career.
It's going to evolve and change for sure. We always finish up by asking our guests a couple of questions. So the first one we always ask is, if you could be a fly on the wall in a situation, where would you love to be, and just have a little look and see what's going
intrigued.
on? We'll find out just how nosy you are now.
Or what you're nosy about.
I had to have a little sort of think about this. So I asked a friend, and they said, say that you wanted to be a fly on the wall when Fergie threw the boot at David Beckham's head.
Oh, okay, that's good.
I was like, probably not something I would say, but actually, I think I would like to know maybe what was going on in that laboratory in Wuhan all those months ago. Yeah. I want to be a little fly on the wall there and see what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, the global impact of that moment is going to be written in the history books.
If someone did truly go, no.
Yeah. Yeah, was there a moment?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Where's that vial gone?
You sort of wish someone would have gone, oops, done my bad.
Yeah. No, yeah.
It was like that when I got here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, honestly,
it wasn't me.
It was him. And our second question is if you could meet somebody, if you could meet anyone, and that can be a real person, a fictional person, somebody from days of past, somebody still around, who would you like to sit down with and meet?
So obviously not to end it on a downer, but I never met my grandparents. My grandparents passed away before I was born. Oh. So obviously having a rich cultural heritage in the sense that half Russian, half English, I would have loved to have met them. My Russian grandfather was a Russian space engineer.
Oh,
wow. Actually helped build the sort of rockets in the space race, and grandmother was an actress, a theatre actress.
Would he been one of the guys who put Sputnik up?
Yeah, it would have all been around the same sort of time and things. So
I'll tell you the reason
that's fascinating.
Is I guess there's obviously the strong family element to it, but he would have been a pioneer. He would have been at the very beginning of the space race, because thinking of your age and your parents and your grandparents, that would have put him at an age where space was a new thing. It was something you looked up in the sky and you saw, but nobody had been out there. So he would have been breaking ground that had never been broken before. And it actually ties in quite nicely with you and what you do, because your grandparents.
Maybe I have some of that bloodline.
That was lovely. I like that. That was a brilliant figure out. Andrew Acton. That was as smooth as a cashmere codpiece, my friend. That was a genius.
I could have always written that.
Yeah, you could. That was brilliant. No, that brings it around nicely.
But isn't it that pioneering stuff? You're both pioneers.
I mean, it must be somewhere in my DNA. Like I said, I don't come from a family of medics or business, or entrepreneurs. So there's somewhere in there, there's some DNA that's given me this spark, and I'm grateful for it. I'm here for it.
It's going to be the moon therapist. That's it now, the lunar therapist. There we go.
Yeah, whatever it is, it's working for you, isn't it? It's working for you, which is brilliant. Lovely. Cheers, Anna. I really, really appreciate your time. It's been great.
it's fascinating to find out more about you, which I think is you see all the social media and you read the articles, but it's lovely to get to know the person behind and your motivations and that tenacity is just phenomenal.
The maniac.
Yeah, and I love the fact that we've now set you a challenge because we told you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so honestly, you know what? I'm going to end this is something else I was always apologetic for, which was for my wins and my successes. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm here to stay. I'm very proud. I've sat down. I've really taken it all in, and actually, this is probably just the start of way more to come from myself and many others. So
brilliant.
Yeah,
accept it and congratulate yourself.
Yeah,
accept it and congratulate yourself. That's what you should do.
I think that's a really positive, uplifting bit to finish on. Cheers, Anna. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks a lot.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Cheers. What a great conversation with Anna.
Brilliant. I tell you what, you've read lots of stuff, seen lots of social media stuff, but to actually chat to her and talk to her about her motivations and the history and the family history, and that she, I'm sure she won't mind saying is a little bit bonkers, but the fact that she, if you set her a challenge, she'll attack it.
And that tenacity really does run deep, doesn't it? And it does make you wonder, and it's hard to unpick. Obviously, moving around a lot as a child and changing schools and starting to work quite young and not taking no for an answer. And that when she told the story about when she wanted to get a job as a dental nurse, where she basically drew a map of all the dental practice in town and walked around.
I say with no car. You must that education. You just must sort of build self-sufficiency.
Yeah,
because you can't be. By the sounds of things, she wasn't anywhere long enough to sort of build almost a community. So that just really come out.
But
in
also
what
a
she's doing.
long-term thinker. She's kind of that getting the London Hygienist brand, putting it in her pocket for a bit, working out how to use it, then planning her next stage and talking about, what the future might look like. This stuff isn't just acting by accident, happening by accident. No. There's a plan. No, I thought she was really
lesson for everybody, whether they be dentists, hygienists, therapists, or anybody. To be
and also a message to the profession that it's changing, it's evolving. And people like Anna doing what she's doing is a sign that the profession won't look like it does in 5 years, 10 years' time. And embracing those changes is really important.
You have to evolve, or you do dissolve.
Yes.
Evolve or dissolve.
Exactly.
No, brilliant. I thought she was great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.